welcome to a special edition episode of They Live by Film. My name is Adam Lundy. Just doing a quick introduction to this special edition episode in which we sat down with Vinegar Syndrome archivist Justin LaLiberty. Chris and Zach did a really great interview with Justin. So good we didn't really feel like we wanted to cut it down to fit it into a normal episode. So we're going to present it to you here in its entirety. So I'm just going to hop right into the interview. Cheers.
All right. So joined here today by Justin LaLiberty. From Vinegar Syndrome. He's an archivist and, if I got this right, also pretty involved in the partner labels. Justin, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining. Are you in the generally kind of New York, Connecticut, New Jersey area? Is that where you find home?
Yeah, I live in Norwalk, Connecticut, so just a bit south from Bridgeport, which is where our Vinegar Syndrome headquarters are.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thanks for joining. And we're recording on a Sunday morning of the giant Memorial Day halfway to Black Friday sale. So I don't know how involved you are in the ongoing maintenance of that site and everything during the sale, but I appreciate you making time.
Yeah, I mean it's a very hectic time for us. Luckily, the website is not part of my job, but
Okay.
you know, I'm very involved in the social media stuff and just kind of helping answer questions that come in as much as I can, and you know, especially anything related to partner labels. And
So
yeah,
have you seen the video that, Grindhouse Video down in Tampa, they do a lot of aero video stuff that comes into the US. Have you seen the video that guy Mike posts about how crazy his shop is after the sales?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Is that so? So what happens after this sale closes on Monday? Is it just kind of all hands on deck, or do y'all have like distribution partners, or what's the next like 2 weeks going to be for y'all?
We do everything in-house. So it's, you know, we have a great team of staff who are, you know, a bunch of full-timers and then some people we bring in part-time. And we have shipping going out of here in Connecticut, out of Colorado, and then we have Toronto shipping. So it's a pretty all hands on deck type of situation. Even if people aren't packing boxes, they're probably doing something that's assisting with the sale, kind of the fallout, I guess you could say.
That's awesome. Well, I'm very appreciative of it. I think I told you before. I'm trying the subscription. Last Black Friday, I tried it for the first time. I think that's such a brilliant commercial model. What a creative way to get people kind of engaged and loyal to the brand. I think it's just fascinating. And the movies that are coming out are, you know, ones that I may not have bought otherwise, but I'm watching now because I'm part of the subscription. And so it's been a really great way to kind of discover new films. I always, when I talk about Vinegar Syndrome, I always say it's, you know, they're getting the Criterion or the Arrow treatment, but more from the lens of like the VHS era movies that may have sometimes not even had a DVD release. And maybe even the way that you structure your menus around like talking about reels instead of chapters, it's really heavily focused on preservation and like a reminder that these are all things that were recorded on, you know, on physical kind of reels that are being digitized. Is that how close am I there in my synopsis?
I mean, that's definitely true. Like, we're all extremely passionate about film. It's pretty rare for a film distribution company, let alone one devoted to home video, to have a functioning archive and to have someone maintaining that archive. So I think that in itself separates Vinegar Syndrome from pretty much anybody else really doing what we do. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a call to film. That's the Vinegar Syndrome name is, of course, regarding something that happens to film as it decays. So, which is, you know, what we're trying to stop from happening, of course. And that's the structure and the mission of the company, is to kind of save film and save these films that would otherwise be lost.
That's great. Do you mind giving a little bit of a background as to what an archivist does, to the level of detail you can go into? I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, archivists, you know, especially like moving image archivists, all kind of do different things depending on what their skill set or job or, you know, workflow is. But I think the primary principles is that you're trying to conserve and, you know, stop any kind of long-term decomposition from individual elements. So if you have a film that was shot on 35 millimeter or 16 millimeter, 70 millimeter, you know, whatever kind of that material that went through the camera, you want to try and get whatever the closest to the original is and put that in a room that's cold, dry, and, you know, that you're taking care of any damage that results. So if you get in a negative and it's got, you know, the perforations on the film that help it run through the projector, if those are torn, you want to repair those. If something's, ripped, you want to put some tape or cement on that and put it in good order so it can run through a scanner. So with us, it's all this film isn't just sitting in a room. I mean, of course it does sit in a room like we do. We have thousands of reels and they're climate controlled and they're being kept, safely and well maintained. But at the same time, we are accessing these materials for the purposes of scanning. So where some archives, a lot of things are just kind of there for preservation. Ours are there for preservation, but also for access. So we need to take these and we need to scan them. And somebody in my position in that capacity will inspect those reels, make sure that they're, structurally sound so that they can go through these machines, and also determine, if we have different materials, what those materials are. So if we have a negative and an interpositive and a print, are they all the same runtime? Is there a differing version? Did one version come from Europe? One's from America? Is the footage not aligned perfectly? Like, is one more uncut than the other? You might have something with like a different soundtrack. So there's things are different depending on the film. So the job of an archivist can change, exponentially depending on what film you're working on at a given time. But I think the guiding principle is just to save and keep available whatever the most original version is.
Well, fuck, that just literally sounds like the only job I ever want to do. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, it's great.
um, how, I don't know, again, tell me if to the extent you can talk about this, how many films does Vinegar Syndrome have in their archive?
I can't really give like a
Okay.
number, but I will say it's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, I've been in many archives, and it's one of the larger ones I've seen.
The other big one down here, I don't know where the actual room is where these are kept, but there's another big one from AGFA, right? They're also big.
Oh, yeah.
I live in Austin, Texas, and I know that there's a bunch of folks down here that are interested in a similar type of, preservation and archiving.
Yep. I mean, we work closely with AGFA, and I've been in the AGFA archives, and yeah, I mean, they're great people. They're very similar mission, both in terms of like what they're trying to do to the content, but also the content itself.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I was really excited when they had a partner label announced. I think maybe that's the other question, just by way of introduction, kind of getting to know you a little bit. So, what's your engagement with the partner labels, if you don't mind? Just kind of because there's I just got a copy of. I forget the name of the movie, but the name of the band is Impaled Rectum.
Oh, Heavy Trip.
Heavy Trip. There you go. And I'm going to watch it here in the next few days. I love the diversity all the way from like Fun City Editions to that label. The film production or the production company is called Doppelganger, but I know that's not the name of
It's Music Box. Yeah.
There we
go. Yeah.
Yeah, Music Box to Utopia, like quite a wide range of films that may not necessarily make it into mainstream Vinegar Syndrome releases, but I love scouring through your partner labels kind of site and seeing what's coming out there. So yeah, like, do you mind any kind of background on that and sort of how y'all view that? I'd love to hear about it.
So the partner labels is very new. That started like over a year ago. Just kind of, with AGFA was the first one to come on, and then we had Utopia came on, which has been great. All the partner labels are companies we really admire. So I think one of the things that gets confusing is a lot of, the Vinegar Syndrome fans think the partner labels are like secret Vinegar Syndrome things, and they're not. These are very much companies that all exist on their own. They have their own staff. They pick their own movies. They're doing things all on their own for the most part, outside of the distribution process, which is where we come in as a distributor, and that distribution company is OCN Distribution. So these are not, put out by Vinegar Syndrome. They are sold on the Vinegar Syndrome site, and we hope the Vinegar Syndrome fans appreciate them and purchase them and share them, but they are not Vinegar Syndrome releases, which is kind of the confusion, I think, online. But yeah, as far as my involvement, I came, in addition to film archiving, I have a film programming background. And so I, kind of knew a lot of people from different companies through that, and just sort of different distribution related things. And I kind of fell into working on a lot of these and just kind of working in the workflow of it, the logistics of it, the planning of it. And that's something that you really need. You kind of need something bringing this all together and pushing it out. And yeah, it's been great. I really like working with all of the labels. It's a great group of people. And I think the content, the films that they're putting out are really unique. And I think they fit in well with what we're doing, even if, you have like a documentary from Utopia or, something from Music Box, whatever you have that might not seem like it fits alongside like a Vinegar Syndrome horror film, the ethos is still there. The idea that we're all trying to bring out films that are marginalized or would otherwise potentially languish. A lot of these films, if we weren't helping with the distribution, they might not get out.
Yeah.
You kind of need somebody around to kind of pick that up and say, hey, we see what you're doing, we support it, we want to help you, we have a network, we have a distribution pipeline, and we can get you into that so that we can champion your content. And that's really important, and I think we're in a great position to kind of do that, and to not only shine a light on these companies that we admire, but to get these films an audience. And yeah, I'm really happy with the partner labels, and I think from the response, it seems like the Vinegar Syndrome fans are too.
Yeah, Zach, I know you have a million questions. Just one thing that came up when we asked, there's a subreddit called Boutique Blu-ray, and we just told them that there's this interview coming up, what kind of questions they had. And one of the ones that came up, I'm curious how, and I'm sure there's not like a traditional kind of easy path, but like for somebody who's maybe, 17, 18, 20 on Reddit, or 39 like me and just loves the what you do, like how do you transition into a career in either film archiving or film programming, or like how do you kind of get into this world a little bit, because it just sounds like a dream for people that really love cinema.
I mean, it is a dream. Like, this is, what I wanted to do. Maybe not this specific thing, but working, in this industry in general, in any capacity, is like what I wanted to do since I was a child. So I started as a teenager, like working in movie theaters and video stores. I went to film school. I went to grad school for film preservation, which is kind of how I became an archivist. And then just like, worked as a projectionist, film festivals, movie theaters. I just stayed in it. So I've been working in like exhibition or something tangential to it since I was 15, 16. So 20 years. So it's been a long time. But as far as programming, that's something I had been, I guess, programming sort of on the side for a while, and then I got picked up to do programming full time. And it's just one of those things. There's a lot of happenstance. There might be some luck in it, some of it's networking, but I think a lot of it is just passion. I think if you want to do it and you can devote the time to doing it, then you can kind of make it happen. So I think it's a great industry, and it's a really welcoming industry. So as long as you have, the fortitude to kind of stick some of it out, I think it's great. It's some of it can be difficult, but I think that's with any industry. If you want to get into something, like, you have to be willing to take that minimum wage job and kind of work your way up somehow, and spend time networking. And yeah, I mean, I think industries sort of operate similarly, and this industry is not that dissimilar to other ones. You just have to work at it.
Yeah, thank you.
You were talking about the climate controlled for the films and everything, keeping like the reels and archiving. I know from my understanding years ago, this used to be things like you throw film reels in like a salt mine. And I'm guessing it's a lot different than that now. I'm sure you probably can't go into too many specifics on that. I'm just kind of curious how it's evolved since that type of day. And I'm sure there's still people that do that. They'll use salt mines and things like that. But is it a lot different now?
I mean, you could do that. That's not, a terrible thing to do. It's better than storing it in your humid attic. I think there's a lot of people like, kind of, I don't want to say like amateur archivists, but I think people who want to archive kind of at home, like maybe film collectors or people who have an extensive home movie library, something like that. They're more likely to kind of take their film and say, I'm going to put it in my attic or put it in my garage or something. And it's like, don't do that. Like, definitely don't do that, especially any room that can potentially get humid. So even like basements, which is honestly probably the best place to put your film, would be your basement over your attic, of course. But even then, it's like you need to dehumidify that room. You need to make sure it's cool. You definitely don't want dampness is almost worse than heat. So you really don't want to have, like, you could have a basement that's 65 degrees, which is still a little bit warmer than you want it to be. But if you had a basement that's 65 degrees and your humidity was like 50%, that would not be good. Like, you don't want You don't want your film to be like around moisture at all. That's a big enemy of film. So as far as how it's evolved, I think it's, technology is a huge part. So you have, films still pretty young. You're looking at films only like 130 some odd years old, somewhere around there. So, in film preservation is even younger than that. So people have only really been trying to preserve film in terms of like moving image stock for like a little over a century or so. And then beyond that, like your digital preservation is incredibly young. So with film especially, I mean, you're scanning these films, and then once you scan it, I mean, you still have the film that you're preserving, but now you also have to preserve that scan. And preserving files, as anybody knows, I mean, even if you have a hard drive full of MP3s, you know what can happen to those. And it's, very easy to lose them, or for the quality to diminish, or, obsolescence is a thing. So all of a sudden you have these terabytes and terabytes of data, and now you don't have a machine that can read them. So as far as the technology in film preservation, it's evolving, and it has evolved, and you just kind of have to stay on top of it. But of course, doing that comes with great expense, and a lot of archives are nonprofits, so there's a lot of grants that need to be given. And then the for-profit archives, there's not a ton of money in film preservation. So even if you're a for-profit archive, the costs of climate controlling a large room in itself is daunting, and outfitting a room for like appropriate shelving, or buying cans. You don't want to store your film in like a rusty can or a dusty cardboard box. You want to put it, they have these nice like archival plastic cans for each reel of film that are vented, and that's what you want to put your film in. And those are like a couple of bucks a piece, so you end up with a few thousand reels of film, and all of a sudden you're spending tens of thousands of dollars on just materials alone to store it. And that's without your electric bill for air conditioning and your dehumidifiers and the rent you need for a space that large. So I mean, film preservation it's difficult and it's expensive, and maybe putting things in a salt mine is cheaper. So people probably like to do things that are maybe easier and more organic, I guess.
One of the favorite stories I heard was through one of your partner labels. I think it was ACFA actually. They found a copy of Bat Pussy just like randomly in a video store, and now it has a digital copy that's out there. I think it's currently out of print, but anyways, I'm sure it'll come back in print at some point in some fashion. But like this movie that through traditional distribution channels would have really never seen the light of day. It's so obscure, and even when you watch the movie, it's one of my favorite comedies ever, by the way. But like, even when you watch the movie, it's so quirky and kind of offbeat. For it to find a home and then get a digital transfer and be restored forever, I think it's so beautiful. I'm so happy it happened, and that's one of my favorite kind of like films being stored poorly, but luckily being found before they broke apart kind of stories.
I mean, there's a ton of those. It's every year or so you kind of hear a story of like, oh, the negative for this film or the uncut version of this film is like found in a barn or like a gas station, or you just never know where it's going to turn up. And I mean, that's even true for us. Like, we'll look for elements, and an unlikely place is where you'll find it, and which is great, but also like makes you pause and think like, where are these things that we've been looking for 100 years or 50 years, or what condition are they being kept in? And I think that's what makes what we do so important. And for any archive, is that not only do we know where those things are, but we know that they're being kept well. Whereas if some producer has them, or a bank, or like a school, or whoever, if they don't have the skills that they know how to take care of it, they could just be deteriorating, and rapidly, depending on what it is and from when.
I know, I can't remember the story exactly, but I know with Scream Factory, where they put their Friday 13th set out, they had, I think it was near like right before they released it, they found like a VHS tape with some of the uncut stuff, and they were able to finally include it. And obviously, I guess you probably don't want to necessarily rely on finding old VHS tapes, because I'm guessing the quality wouldn't be quite the same as on the film reel. But it's always cool to see things like that come up, where some random person just has it laying around somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, we've done that too. Sometimes if there's no film and you want to put out the most complete version, if those scenes that you need are on VHS or beta or whatever, digital video, source it from a DVD if you have to. If that's the way you get your most complete version out, that's what you do. I mean, you're not, we're archivists and we want the best quality material, but if that's all that's left, we're not going to say no.
Right.
That's what you do. You just try and make do with what you have, and people are usually excited to see the rare footage a lot more so than they would be if they just got the version without it. So I think it works out well enough. And then, if there's some miracle down the line and like that footage is found on film, it's like you can always go back and do it again for the most part. I mean, unless, rights of course become an issue, but beyond that, if you have the wherewithal to do it, like you can do it again.
Is there a particularly does one of the films in for video Vinegar Syndrome have like a strange story of where something was found?
Not really that I can think of, but I mean, there's definitely stories of just like things that kind of had to rely on different elements. You can kind of see like some of the discs we have, you'll put it in and there'll be like some kind of a disclaimer that will say like, certain parts of this film were like sourced from video or sourced from a different master. So they're, please don't judge the quality. Like, there's like plenty of those kind of instances, but yeah, I can't really think of anything where we like, found a film in a closet or something, but for the most part, it's, we're dealing with film that's from archives and from people who are storing it well.
Cool.
You said archive. So one of the partner labels that I think I'm now complete on, other than halfway to Black Friday, there's going to be a few more coming out, but is the Vinegar Syndrome archive line.
Yep.
Now, I know you said that a lot of the partner labels are not tied to Vinegar Syndrome. That one is at least in by name, but is it run as a separate company?
No, so that's not a partner label. That's just like a different line. So that's
Okay.
like Vinegar Syndrome Archive and Vinegar Syndrome Ultra are Vinegar Syndrome like run, and those are just like lines under Vinegar Syndrome. So they're just like a different line basically. And then like we have Picorama, which is our adult films. So
Yeah.
yeah, those all exist under the Vinegar Syndrome umbrella, but yeah, they are Vinegar Syndrome releases.
And I've been trying to figure it out. Is the main distinction between like Vinegar Syndrome archive and the main line, like things that come from the archive store? Is that kind of the main difference?
No, I mean it was just kind of like a reference to the store.
Okay.
So it's not, yeah, they aren't like from the store or anything. I mean, we sell them in the store. The whole idea around that line is that it supports like brick and mortar stores. So like we have a store for anybody who's listening that's in the New England area. It's in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and you can come and visit and buy movies. Like all of our movies are sold there, and records and all kinds of other things. So that was just kind of a call to like, hey, we have a store and it's called The Archive because, we archive films. And yeah, so Vinegar Syndrome Archive became a line, and those releases are only sold in physical stores or on our website. So that's the only way to get them. And that was kind of the idea, was just to support like stores that are basically doing this thing in person that is, pretty lost in a lot of places.
Beautiful. That's the missing piece for me. That's really cool. Yeah, and y'all put out Action USA, which is probably the film I point anybody to when they want to know like what movie is just a good time. I don't know that it's in my top 5 of all time, but like I wouldn't feel bad putting it there. That movie, I just love like every second of it. It's so amazing that it exists.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan.
So I was already kind of I already knew about the Vinegar Syndrome archive line, and like I think I probably had 3 or 4. But when y'all put that out, I committed to going back and finding the ones that are out of print and just completing it because I wanted to like support anybody that knew about that movie first of all, but then also would take the time to put it out.
That's great.
Since we're on the VSA and VSU, this is gonna be more of a compliment, but and you might have done. I love the packaging. Like I'm a big sucker for packaging when it comes to like boutique labels. Like I still miss the window boxes for Arrow, just because I think it's distinct. I think it gives it a lot of personality. The designs for those, like, do you have like know much about the process of how those were designed and how they came up with those? I think they're very neat, especially the VSU title and the I guess the VHS like VSA packaging.
Yeah, I mean, well, as far as the art's concerned, we just work with, a number of different artists that we really like working with. So those are all kind of approached on a title by title basis. And yeah, the boxes for VSA were definitely, supposed to be reminiscent of VHS, kind of top loading sleeves. And then VSU, we really wanted like a nice prestige package and something that stood out. So what it comes down to ultimately is that all of us at Vinegar Syndrome, we're all collectors and we all love this. We're not a company that's putting out things and we're just like, hey, we'll throw $50 on this price tag and throw it out and like hopefully people will buy it. Like, we're coming from a place where it's like, would we want to own this? Would we want this on our shelf? Would we want to show this off? And like in my apartment right now, like I have the Beastmaster box like proudly on display in my own apartment. So like these are, we're coming from a place where like we love these films, we love what we do and what we're putting out, and like at the end of the day, we want to put out a product that we're proud of and that we would want to see in people's homes and want to have in our homes. And I think the VSU package is that. It's something I love, that you can take it and put it on a table and it just stands up. Like it doesn't, you don't need to lean it on anything. Like it just stands straight up, and that magnetic closure, it's just like really satisfying. And I love a good ribbon that you can like lift everything up with. And so, I mean, it just has like all these little pieces that I think came together into a package that, really kind of it showed what we care about when it comes to like home video design and like the wraparound art and like the art being all inside the case. And it's just, yeah, I think it's a really glorious package, which maybe I'm overselling it, but yeah,
No,
I'm very happy with it.
I think it helps too, because for me, funny enough, my girlfriend's seen Beastmaster. I've never seen it. I've never watched the movie, but I love the packaging so much. I was like, I'm going to have to buy it. It'd be the best way to watch it. And I just love the way it's set up. So I think it's awesome because it makes me spend more money. Oh, that looks awesome.
I wish this was a video podcast so people could see what you're doing. Oh my gosh. That's the 6-string samurai sneak peek.
Oh, man.
Wow.
This is the slipcover.
Oh, it looks so good.
Wow. When are those going to start shipping roughly? Like basically as the sale closes, like over the
next
like
week? The next week. So
wow.
And then it goes, make sure I got this right. It goes subscribers, then early, the people who bought the early pre-orders, and then standard orders, right?
Yep.
Oh, wow. That looks beautiful. Yeah, I don't, are you sort of comfortable talking about your collection at all?
Yeah, sure.
So I always am interested to talk to other collectors. So that was kind of the reason that we got together and started this podcast, was around a film club discussion. And then the three of us specifically just loved collecting physical discs. So do you keep it all in your house? Do you mind talking about roughly like the size?
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in my apartment. I mean, it's like half of my living room.
That's great. So, it's like it looks like over 1,000 for sure. Just at the quick scan.
It's like 2,000 right now, a little bit more, because there's some that aren't out that are like in other places. So a lot of the Vinegar Syndrome stuff is actually in my bedroom because it's taking over, and it was getting to the point where my living room is just like everything in my living room is like Vinegar Syndrome. So now a lot of that's in my bedroom. But yeah, I mean, I've been collecting since I was a teenager, as I think a lot of collectors have. That's kind of when I really got into it. And that was, I'd say it probably was more when I was a kid and I started with VHS, but not like, cool niche underground VHS, just like tapes you buy at, Blockbuster. So, and, then the collecting for me really began with Laserdisc to an extent, which was kind of at the tail end. I came in at like the tail end of that, but I remember getting like the big T2 box and like things like, these things, they were like so heavy. And it was crazy because people complain about like what boutique Blu-rays cost now. And it's like, we're dropping like $150 on a Laserdisc. Like you wanted to buy like the, nice big Laserdisc box and they were like at least $100. And it's just like, yeah, I know. I guess $50 for a Blu-ray or a UHD is expensive, but when you compare it to Laserdisc, it's like nothing. So yeah, I think Laserdisc and then DVD. I mean, DVD, I think, is where a lot of collectors kind of got in.
Yeah.
It became collectible and you had like special features or more of a thing. And then of course Blu-ray. But yeah, I mean, I love collecting. I love the packaging, just having things. I mean, as an archivist, the idea of things not being physical is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Having a library that's just like files, like that doesn't compute. Like I have to be able to see it and touch it.
It's so satisfying to like take it off the shelf, watch it, put it back on the shelf, organize it every few years because you're thinking of a new order.
Yeah, I love organization. I mean, when I worked at video stores for a few years, and like my favorite thing to do is to kind of just like go through sections and like re-alphabetize things because it would drive me crazy. Like going through, like somebody would come up and like, I can't find this movie, and then it's like, well, it's supposed to be there, and you'd go and you'd find it like totally misfiled, and it's like, well, I need to redo this this whole section and just like re-alphabetize it, and that's also something I carry with me as an archivist too. It's just like taxonomy and things being organized, and I don't know. I might be crazy, but
That's well, you're speaking to other crazy people, so this is all family here. What were the labels that kind of got you into, I guess, like more boutique style collecting? Like, for me, it was Criterion, Anchor Bay, kind of like early 2000s, like Anchor Bay, Blue Underground started having some beautiful packaging. Fantoma had some really interesting releases. They had like a Coffin Joe that was actually in the shape
yeah,
of a
I
coffin.
had that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what were the labels that kind of got you
I
into?
mean, all of the above. Criterion, I think, is the gateway.
Uh-huh.
There's so many now, but Criterion was definitely at the start, like especially like the late '90s, early 2000s, like when I was a teenager and like really getting a lot more into like foreign cinema. Like I think that was like a big deal for me, like being able to just buy like all the Kurosawa and Godard movies and
Uh-huh.
things that I don't like watch a ton of now. My tastes have definitely changed, or it's kind of like a lot of stuff that I like checked off a list. And Criterion were like really great for that. For like, oh, they have all these like really great canonical things that I'll probably watch one time. But they also had a lot of stuff that totally changed like who I was. Like the Buñuel films or something that I still like hold really dear to me.
Yeah.
They were like a big thing. But Anchor Bay, especially as somebody who was obsessed with genre and with like horror movies. And Anchor Bay, I mean, I don't know how many times I've bought like Army of Darkness or Evil Dead. It's like every time they came out with something, it's like, oh, this one's got a number on it. And it's funny when you go back to those now. Or like, I remember getting that limited edition of Manhunter, and you go back to like that DVD, and we do all these limited editions now. We're like, it's limited to 5,000, 10,000, and that seems like a high number. And those old Anchor Bay limited editions are hilarious because you look at the back and it's like limited to 90,000 copies, and it's just like it's like totally a different landscape, like back in the '90s or early 2000s. But yeah, Anchor Bay was huge. Criterion was huge. Blue Underground, who are still like constantly doing amazing things. Their UHDs are just like beautiful. Everything they put out on UHD, I'm just like completely shocked by how good it looks.
Yeah.
Yeah, those companies are all huge for me. One of the big ones who doesn't exist anymore was Tartan. They
Oh
were,
yeah.
especially that Asia Extreme line.
Asian.
That was like a
Yeah.
really big thing for me when I was a teenager. Like the Tetsuo movies were huge. And then Arrow, once they started coming in like in the UK, I was like importing all that stuff. I remember like having to like use my mom's credit card to like buy the Martin when they put out Martin. It was like, buying all those things from overseas, and I had been buying from Diabolic DVD for a while. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of all those companies were a huge thing, and I'm happy that a lot of them are still going.
I remember that brings up some memories. Early 2000s, they were bringing a lot of Takashi Miike films into like I lived in Dallas at the time, and they were showing a lot of his in like the local art houses, and Tartan was the only one putting him out on disc.
Mm-hmm.
So I had probably 15 or 20 of his movies on DVD. But
yeah, that whole line was great. That Asia Extreme line was just, it was like them, and then like Weinstein would put out like, whatever, like, I don't remember what the line was, but Dimension and the Weinstein Company or Miramax or whoever, they were doing a lot of like weirder Asian stuff too. And it was just between like those companies. And then I guess Wellgo kind of took over a lot of that. But
and then there was one
yeah.
that Anime I Go, I think, put out the
Mhm.
Lone Wolf and Cub ones. But anyways, not to go off on
So
that.
I've got to ask, with you guys putting out Scanner Cops 1 and 2, how does it feel to get Scanners Cops 1 and 2 out before Criterion can get Scanners out on UHD?
I mean, I don't want to speak ill of Criterion because I still love what they do, but
Oh, I do too. I just think
I mean,
funny.
I just, it's for me, it's one of those things where it's like technology changes and the consumers change and you kind of have to move with it. And to me, not doing UHD right now seems crazy, but that's coming from somebody who's a collector and also in the industry. Like, I feel like that's where it's going. So to not support that seems like, you're kind of just avoiding change. So I don't really understand that, but I mean, and it's not only Scanner Cop. We got Sex World out on UHD before like Seven Samurai or anything. So I'm very proud that, you know, Sex World is out on UHD, and we've got all these great things. And it's also, like I was saying, Blue Underground, you know, it's amazing. Like you have Daughters of Darkness. Whoever thought we'd see like Daughters of Darkness in 4K with HDR? Like it's a crazy time to be alive as a physical media fan. And I think that shows like in how good this stuff is. Because you can buy like a lot of these studio UHD discs, and there's a lot that are really good. And I just watched the Sony UHD for Last Action Hero last night, which is great. But then you can like buy some of these from a studio and you put it in. It's like, this doesn't even look better than the Blu-ray. And I think that leads to a lot of like more general consumers being like, why would I ever buy UHD? But the place where you're finding like those demo discs right now is with the boutiques. It's like, you know, the 4K from Synapse of Suspiria. It's like beautiful. And like those Blue Underground ones. And it's just like, that's where I think the great work is happening. I mean, Arrow's doing a great job with them too. I'm really excited for Dune. And like, obviously I'm partial to our UHD releases, but I think it's really weird that, you know, even you kind of saw that with Blu-ray, but I think you're really seeing it now with UHD. And I think that's because the collector market has changed so much. And now it's the people who are really moving UHD, I think in the right direction, are boutique labels.
So was the move to UHD kind of like, did it feel kind of like a no-brainer when you guys decided to move to that route to 4K UHD? Or
I mean, it was definitely not something we did, you know, without caution or without thought, I guess you could say. We definitely thought about it. Like we, you know, it's not a cheap format either for the consumer or for the manufacturing. So it was something we definitely gave thought to. And, you know, our first one was Tammy and the T-Rex. And I think it was pretty obvious right away that people wanted it. And yeah, we haven't turned back. So
it's awesome.
Have you ever come across a gentleman named Craig Rogers? He lives out west.
no.
He was, you know, Arbelos Films, they have both physical media side, but they also have the restoration side. So he broke off and started a new company with Dennis Bartok called Deaf Crocodile. And just by coincidence, he was the first interview that we had back when we were just reaching out to pigs saying, do you want to talk to a young podcast? But they're doing, what is the John Carpenter movie they're doing, Zach?
Assault on Precinct 13.
There you go. Yeah. So he's working on a 4K restoration of that.
That's great.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that one.
I think they're getting theater rights for it as well. So
That's right.
It's going to be in theaters again.
That's right. Yeah. But to your point, you know, it takes people that really care about what they're producing, right? And have that kind of like the thoughtfulness behind it of like what, like why make this generational leap, right?
Yep.
For it to make a difference. Kind of one that leads up to a question I'm thinking about. So I actually took a break from collecting just for a lot of reasons, starting a couple businesses and starting a family and just not as much cash as I had before for a while. And I got back into it around late 19, early 2020. And there was these new companies because I stopped collecting probably in 2009, 2010. And all of a sudden there was companies like Arrow Video on Blu-ray, Vinegar Syndrome. Like there was these companies that like weren't even around, at least in a major way, as I was kind of like leaving. And it felt to me, at least, like, again, having seen kind of been a part of that early wave and then taking a break, that we're in this sort of crazy time for collectors where like there's new companies coming out. There's like old movies that haven't ever received a DVD release, maybe even a VHS release sometimes. Like Jonathan from Fun City was saying, Jeremy, that movie that he put out, has never had a disc release, and maybe only even a limited VHS release. So, you know, it's just a super interesting time for collectors from somebody who's buying perspective. I'm just curious to hear from the other side. Are y'all getting those similar signals? Like, is this different? What's happening right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's different in that I think the audience is becoming a little bit more wide. You know, I think one of the things you're starting to see is there's less product, at least physical product, coming out from studios. So back in like the DVD era, I mean, it was like every studio was putting out their movies. And it's like, you know, okay, so RoboCop came out, and then like the special edition, and then like the limited edition, and then like the collector's edition with the new footage. And it's like they'd recycle these movies like 5 or 6 times. And now you're not really getting that. So, you know, you kind of had it with Blu-ray, but to a way lesser extent. You know, you maybe got like 2 or 3 copies of RoboCop from MGM, and then like Arrow went and did it. And so I think you started seeing that where a lot of these, even like these bigger titles, these titles that you never thought like studios would kind of let go of, they're like licensing those to smaller companies. And so I think that what you're seeing now with, kind of the boutique companies is they're almost like picking up the slack to an extent, where a lot of these, this kind of thing that they had, this sales, channel or revenue generator that was once a big part of that business, isn't necessarily something that the studios care as much about now. It seems like a lot of that attention kind of moved to streaming. So I think one of the things we kind of see, people look at streaming as like the death of physical media, or like the death of cinema. And like, there's a lot of kind of that like drama centered around streaming and VOD. But to me, it's the life of boutique home video, because the more those licenses are cared about, more so for like, what can we put this on Netflix for? Then they're just like, that mentality around it is kind of like, okay, well, maybe the home video rights can go to these smaller companies, because that's not a thing we care about as much anymore. So I think that's one of the things you're starting to see, is that a lot of these, a lot of consumers that maybe 10, 15 years ago would never have paid attention to a company like ours, or, to some of the other companies that are similar to ours, like, maybe a Mondo Macabro or like a Severin. A lot of these consumers that would never have paid attention like 10 or 15 years ago are now going, I want to buy movies. I like having physical media. Warner Brothers isn't putting stuff out as much. MGM's not putting stuff out as much. Sony isn't. Who is? And you go on to like, Blu-ray.com or the Digital Bits, any of these sites, DVD Talk. And when you look at like what discs are getting reviewed, you're seeing boutique releases get reviewed. So I think that the more that things have been pulled away from like the studio system, the more of that light gets, shined on us and what we're doing. And it doesn't hurt that we're all putting out a good product. I think that's the other thing too, is people are seeing the quality. And as soon as you start putting that time and money and passion into something people care about, if you show that you give a shit, people will in turn give a shit. And I think that's the big thing now too, is that we're taking these films that never had a VHS release, never had a DVD release, and some that did, and we're either improving upon what they already had, or we're showing, hey, just because you have, a low budget horror movie or an erotic film from 40 years ago doesn't mean it can't look amazing, sound amazing, and have special features that were made with care by people who care. And I think that's, kind of the sea change, is that now people who care are doing this, and there's more to work with. So
I love that. That nowhere is that more, and if you have any friends in this particular company, I apologize, no offense meant here, but I think nowhere is that more obvious than in the Paramount Presents line. Have you seen those releases?
Yeah.
They're horseshit. Like, I'm so pissed at them. They barely have special features. Basically, they're just taking like these kind of popular films and putting a spine number on them. And it's just like, you don't understand the consumer at all. Like it's not just about having a spine number. Like, what are you buying? Like, why are you buying these movies, anyways.
Well, one thing I've kind of found that's big through all the people we talked about is building an identity. When I feel like that's a big part of it too, just having your own identity as a label.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely have that. That's,
yeah.
I think, maybe
Sure.
even perhaps more than most, we definitely have an identity. We have a brand. And I think it's also, saying that, I think it's also important to push that, and I think it's important for fans to kind of recognize that that's going to get pushed, that Vinegar Syndrome is going to release things like Rad. Like, we're not always going to release only horror movies. And that's also part of the VSU line. That was kind of one of the guiding ideas behind the VSU line, is it's not only is it UHD, but these are also films that might not necessarily be what people would consider a Vinegar Syndrome film. You might not look at Six String Samurai and go, oh, that belongs in the same label as like some of these 80s horror movies, or, the erotic content. And like, I get that, but I also think like there needs to be room to grow. And, you can kind of see that. And Severin recently announced Overboard.
I was about to bring that up.
Yeah.
And like, people got mad about it.
Awesome.
And it's like, why are you mad about it? Like, it's a movie that's getting a new restoration, that's getting a slipcover, that's having care put into it. And like, even with, the genesis of that title, it's still like, this is a good thing. Like, this is a good thing for home video. It's a good thing to bring in new fans. It's a really good thing to have the people who didn't look at your label before look at your label.
Yeah.
Go, okay, maybe I wouldn't have liked these movies, but I'm going to try them because I really like what they're doing. And then they get a couple and then they're hooked. And like, you don't grow as a company or grow as an industry if you're not willing to take chances and take risks and diversify and do these things that bring in a new audience. You have to bring in a new audience. So it's great to have an identity, great to have branding, but also you have to be willing to kind of push that.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of labels kind of have their own sub label too. You know, I know Arrow's discontinuing Academy, but that was a part of them. Scream and Shout, same thing. So I feel like that's just kind of a good way to go because I don't know. I guess nobody want to be stuck as one thing forever.
Exactly. Well, you run out of stuff. I mean,
yeah.
Eventually, like there's only so many like horror movies made in the 80s or 90s. There's only so many like, porn films to release. Like there's only so many of like a certain thing. So if you're a company, you see companies coming out or something that are just like, all we're going to do is 80s horror movies. And it's like, that well's going to run dry at some point, or you're going to have to start re-releasing things. And which of course is what we saw a lot of in like the early 2000s and the late 90s is companies that just kept, putting out new editions of films. And I think people are getting tired of that. They don't want to just keep rebuying everything over and over and over again. And like maybe they will for Blu-ray, for UHD, but they don't want to buy 4 UHDs of a movie again, especially when the prices keep going up. So if you're starting to charge $50 for a UHD, they're only going to buy that so many times before they're going to stop. So I think it's important. You have to start, kind of expanding who your audience is.
There seems to be a good focus I've noticed with Vinegar Syndrome. There's like a lot of little things that it seems like you guys really listen to the consumer a lot. Like one thing I love during the sales is I can see how many copies of something are left.
Yeah.
And little things like that. I feel there's a lot of information. Where do you guys read? Do you just read just general things online, or do you have like a part of the company that focuses on like customer feedback, or how does that work?
I mean, we're all just heavily involved. So like we're pretty much all on social media. I'm on there like all day, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, just kind of like seeing what the comments are. Some of us interact with the fans directly often, like through our private channels, like I do. There's a couple others that will like comment, as themselves and answer feedback. We make ourselves very available. And then, there's other ways we get customer emails, we see forums online. There's like different groups on different platforms. And so we engage. I mean, we don't, hide behind like our website or anything. We're like out there, we're talking to the fans. And I think it also helps that we're also fans. So like, I'll be in the Vinegar Syndrome group answering questions about Vinegar Syndrome, but I'm also in the Severin group saying how much I love Severin, or I'm in the Mondo Macabro group doing the same thing. So, and you see them doing that too. You see the people who work for Severin and Mondo Macabro and, these other companies, they're all doing the same thing. Like we all kind of love what each other do. So you end up seeing these people and you see those names and it's just like, it clicks and people will privately message me and ask me questions and I'll always answer them. Like I don't, as long as people are polite, as long as people are nice and they want an answer to a question, like I'm more than happy to talk to anyone. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to be approachable and as nice and forthcoming as you can when you can. And yeah, I think that only helps.
Are there any particular favorites you have from Vinegar Syndrome? I know it's hard to probably pick children, but whether it's favorite releases or just favorite movies, are there that you particularly love?
Yeah, I mean, my go-to recommendations are always there's a Jamal Fanaka double feature, Welcome Home, Brother Charles, and MMA. That's like my favorite release that we've done. And then A Woman's Torment is a big one for me. Liquid Sky, which I've always loved, and that was like a huge release when it came out. I'm very partial to the Sex World UHD because I like that we put out the first 4K porno. So I really like that. Champagne and Bullets we just put out this weekend, and I think it's like a total mind melter. Like people are not ready for that movie if they haven't seen it. So I'm really excited about that. Death by Temptation's one I always go to. So there's a bunch. Sudden Fury is another one that I love a lot. The Killing Kind. Yeah, I could just keep going, but yeah, I think that's enough. The Killing Kind is one that I think I'd end on because a lot of people haven't seen it.
Speaking of Death by Temptation, so I see Flesh Eating Mothers and Death by Temptation. It seems like there's at least 2 or 3 trauma movies that y'all have put out, or at least with ties to Troma in some capacity. Is there any chance that there's going to be a more of a tie there in the future? Would y'all ever put out Troma movies?
Oh, there's a ton. There's way more than those. Yeah. So even this, we just did this weekend we did a new slipcover for Nightmare Weekend and Sugar Cookies. Those are both Troma movies.
Oh, great.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of Troma movies in our library. We work with Troma like all the time. So there's more.
That's fantastic. Well, I don't really have any other. I mean, this has been an amazing hour here. I don't have any other questions necessarily. I mean, I could talk to you all day, but Zach, anything else that's on your mind?
No, I just really appreciate you taking the time, Justin, answering these questions. It's been great.
Yeah, it's a great time.
Yeah, definitely. There's I'm trying to think of there's typically been in the last 2 years at least like a big box set release. Not going to ask for any specifics here with you on air, but like, is there a general sense that these big kind of heavy like box sets with multiple films, like are these worth the effort? Just high level, like are they worth the effort when you put them together?
Oh, you mean like our sets, like the Jalo sets and stuff, or like the ones coming from other companies?
No, like the ones y'all are putting out, like the beautiful like Forgotten Jalo, or like there's just some of these bigger sets you're putting out. Like, are they worth the effort? Just generally speaking, like, do you think this?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. I think like our sets are. I mean, I love our sets, but our sets are also small compared to something like the Andy Milligan or Al Adamson sets.
Yeah,
it's like like those sets that are like 15, 20 movies or something. I'm like, I don't even know how you go about like, we don't have the time for that. Like, it's just, I can't even imagine trying to put together some like 20 disc box set right now. But yeah, I mean, our box sets, I think the feedback has been great. People like them. The Forgotten Jalo ones, especially, those are the ones that I think people are like really excited about. So yeah, there's no reason for those to stop anytime soon.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all I have, Justin. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I'm good. Yep.
Thank you so much for coming out. Within the next couple of years, you ever open to doing this again as new titles keep coming out and y'all continue to expand?
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be so many more like partner labels eventually. So if you want to talk more about the partner labels at some point, maybe later in the year or the winter or something, I'm happy to come back.
Yeah, I would love that, because one of the things we've gotten really lucky so far. So we've reached out separately to Fun City and Utopia and had separate issues with them. And I'm, as the labels grow, we're going to continue to reach out and try to have those conversations, because I'm fascinated by this idea of like jumping into this game at this point and kind of getting into the film distribution game. And both have spoken extremely highly of the ease that Vinegar Syndrome has had in kind of getting them launched. Yep. Or how easy that makes the launch. So we have, as they get to 5, 10, 15 releases, like we're going to try to get them back and just see how the journey's been a little bit. And if y'all are growing your partner labels, that's terrible for my wallet, but I'm happy to hear it.
It's going to get pretty crazy. Oh, yeah.
That's exciting. June and December this year sound like they're going to be more devoted towards partner labels. Is that going to generally be a thing that y'all are going to have some months that are just kind of focused on them? Is that kind of an experiment, or do you think is that kind of set?
That's supposed to be the case going forward. So it will always be June and December, basically just following our 2 big sales. So that way we can there's no more Vinegar Syndrome titles those months just because it's too much. And we'll just have the partner titles and then just kind of promote those. So on June 4th, there'll be a few partner titles released, and then we'll do the same thing in December, see how it goes. But yeah, that's the plan, is June and December going forward will be what we're terming a partners only month.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And hope to hear from you. At least, we could find you online. Is there a particular place you like to point people to find you online?
Twitter is probably the best place. So it's easy to find.
That wraps up this week's episode of They Live by Film. If you want to read more of our thoughts, visit theylivebyfilm.com. And you can also follow our Letterboxd, Reddit, and Instagram accounts from the links in the description. For now, take care.